Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now on the phone is Chris Chocola, a former congressman from Indiana and the current president of Club for Growth, a fiscally conservative political organization that advocates low taxes and limited government. And Chris, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
Well, Karl Rove's group, the American Crossroads, has formed a new organization called the Conservative Victory Project, which will target Republican candidates it deems unelectable. Now, the organization was formed because of concerns that Republicans like Todd Akin and Richard Murdoch were blowing races. But some say this group will muzzle the GOP's true base. What do you make of all this?
Well, if you look back at their history, they supported candidates like Charlie Crist and Arlen Specter and opposed candidates like Marco Rubio and Pat Toomey. So I think all you have to do is look at the history of what Karl Rove has viewed as the electable candidate in the past, and you can measure or decide for yourself what you think their future might be with this new group. We just think that principled conservatives can win anywhere, and we think that there's a false electability standard that you really can't rely on if you don't couple the candidate with a principled conservative message. So we're really happy that there's Senator Rubio and Senator Toomey now, and we think that when the establishment tries to pick a candidate simply because they're Republican and simply because they view them as electable, but don't really focus on the core principles that they articulate, that that's a pretty bad situation to find yourself in. You're not helping the Republicans by doing that.
Now, some have likened this to a civil war within the Republican Party. Is it that serious?
Well, I don't think it's that serious. I think that, our model at the Club for Growth is to find champions of economic freedom that can deliver a clear, convincing economic conservative message, like Rubio and Toomey and Ted Cruz in Texas and Jeff Flake in Arizona. They're going to win Republican primaries most of the time. Ted Cruz had $20 million spent against him in a primary, so they can withstand an onslaught of money from the other side because they have the better message. So, I don't think it's going to necessarily be a civil war. I think there might be some money that is wasted, because the question isn't why Todd Akin and Richard Murdoch lost. We know why they lost, but the question, is really, why did Heather Wilson in New Mexico, Rick Berg in North Dakota, Denny Rehberg in Montana, Tommy Thompson in Wisconsin, George Allen in Virginia, and Linda Lingle in Hawaii, why did they lose? They were the clear the field, establishment back, let them just go win candidates for the Republicans, all lost. Mm-hmm. That's the question that Karl Rove and Steve Law really should be asking themselves more than Denny or Todd Akin and Richard Murdoch. We know why they lost, but it's the 6 other races that they should really be examining as to what went wrong there. And
intra-party primary squabbles, do they damage candidates before they even face, a general election?
I hope not, because if you can't win your primary and articulate a message that wins, then you're not going to be very well prepared for the general election. Generally, primaries are a good test. It tests your campaign structure, your fundraising ability, and your communications. And so, a good warm-up is I think, a good thing for the big show.
Now, Mark Levin recently said that it's not President Obama who's destroying the Republican Party, but rather the GOP establishment itself. Do you believe that to be the case?
Well, I think that the GOP establishment doesn't learn the lessons from the elections. The 2012 election wasn't Todd Akin and Richard Murdoch. It was all the other establishment candidates that lost because nobody could figure out what they believed. People like Jeff Flake, who won in Arizona in a very tough race against a very well-funded and popular Democrat that had served in the Bush administration, Richard Carmona. Jeff Flake won because people never wondered what he believed. He's had a history of going to the floor of the House and fighting against wasteful spending and fighting for limited government. So people understood that he was a lot different than the Democrat that he was running against. And so he is now a U.S. Senator because he had a clear and convincing message. Pat Toomey in 2010 won in a blue state with a clear and convincing message. Marco Rubio won in a purple state with a clear and convincing message. You can win if you can articulate what Republicans are supposed to stand for clearly and convincingly anywhere. It's the people that are timid and are afraid of what Republicans say they're for, limited government and fiscal responsibility, that lose everywhere. And so that's the lesson that I think that all groups should learn if they want to support Republicans, and sadly they don't.
Chris, let's chat about fiscal issues in Washington. In just a few months, Congress will approach another debt limit impasse and sooner a potential government shutdown over federal funding. As someone who was critical of Speaker Boehner's Plan B just a few months back, do you have any confidence that Speaker Boehner will be able to extract any meaningful spending cuts from President Obama, and should the GOP risk a government shutdown?
Well, you know, the tables have turned a little bit because at least the sequester, to get down in the weeds, is current law, and spending cuts will occur under current law if the Congress doesn't do anything. So it's the opposite situation of the fiscal cliff, where taxes would go up if Congress didn't do anything. So the leverage is with the Republicans, and they have a position of strength to bargain from. I'm being told by Republicans in the House that they are going to let the sequester happen, which is a good thing because it actually lowers the baseline and it actually cuts spending, which is an extraordinary thing for Congress to do. Also, with the continuing resolution and potentially shutting the government down, the problem is Republicans have created the environment where nobody thinks that they'll use their leverage, including the Obama administration doesn't think the Republicans will do it. They need to change that perception. I'm not advocating them shutting the government down. I'm not advocating them not raising the debt ceiling. I'm simply advocating, or the Club for Growth is, that we engage in responsible behavior. But if they can't get responsible behavior and they continue on a path to more debt, more deficit, and suffocating ourselves in big government, then they should use their leverage. And shutting the government down, the pain that will cause will pale in comparison to the pain that we will all suffer if we continue on this path of unsustainability. So it's tough choices, but we have to get back on the right path, and sometimes there's bumps on that road.
Chris, President Obama today failed to comply with the legal deadline of an annual budget proposal. Last week, Congress, as you know, passed a temporary extension of the debt ceiling. But this bill also withholds the pay of lawmakers if they're unable to pass a budget. Do you think we're going to get a budget or see a budget anytime soon?
Well, I'll believe it when I see it. It's amazing to me that Harry Reid and the administration are not held accountable for not simply complying with the Constitution. But they don't seem to suffer any consequences for it. And so Congress, the House, the Republicans in the House are trying to force their hand. And the reason that, the Senate won't offer a budget is because they don't want to reveal their priorities, and they don't want a contrast and a debate over what Republicans want and what Democrats want. And it's pretty simple. I mean, Republicans want less spending, at least that's what they say, and Democrats want more spending. Republicans want limited government, and Democrats want more government. So it's a pretty simple debate. The Democrats don't want to have the debate because they don't really want to tell people what they want to do, although it's painfully obvious. And Republicans don't convince people that they want to do what they say they want to do, but they do have a chance through these series of crises that we're going to run into with the sequester and with the continuing resolution and with the debt limit, that they can stand up for the principles that Republicans run on. They can reveal the Democrats' priorities, and they can make a contrast that really is pretty appealing to most Americans. They want less debt, not more debt, and I think that they want, less spending, not more spending. So they have an opportunity. We'll see if they can take it.
All right, let's talk about 2014. The Club for Growth is getting involved in a number of elections, supporting some Republicans and are working to oppose others who are not conservative enough. Are there any incumbent senators that you see as targets right now?
Well, it's too early to tell. The 2014 cycle is just starting, and as I say, you can't beat anybody with nobody, and there's nobody running right now. So we wait for the candidate fields to take shape. We want to see a clear distinction between the candidates before we get involved, that there has to be a relative difference, and there has to be a viable alternative for us to challenge any incumbent. So we're watching. We think it's a little too early to tell, but every day we wake up, we're checking to see what's new.
Is it also too early to tell, or can you detail for us what Senate races you're focusing on to take from the Democrats in 2014?
Well, again, it's too early to tell.
Okay.
Is the candidate fields take shape, then it becomes clearer. So we're observing every day, kind of as these things develop, but it just hasn't developed enough for us to be able to make any decisions.
All right, Chris, last question for you. During our interview last week, RNC Chairman Reince Priebus told me that Republicans have to be in a perpetual campaign moving forward. Many have said that to be successful, that the GOP has to court more women and more Hispanic voters. What do you view as the strengths and weaknesses of the party's strategy looking toward 2014 and 2016?
Well, what Republicans say they stand for, limited government, fiscal responsibility, personal responsibility, I think is appealing to a vast majority of Americans, regardless of what group, politicians and pollsters try to put people in. People really do, I think, still believe in, the American dream. And I just think Republicans need to be less timid in delivering their message. They're afraid of their message way too often. If they can stand up there and they can say, we have a better path to follow, and we have history on our side, that the free market system has done more for the human soul than any other economic model known to man. It has created the highest standard of living and the strongest economy in the history of the earth, and we support it, and this is how we're going to make your life better based upon it, is a great message. And if they would get over their fear of what the other guy might say and articulate what they say they stand for, I think Republicans will do fine. But a guy like Marco Rubio can do it. A guy like Pat Toomey can do it. A guy like Ted Cruz, who just got elected from Texas, can do it. They should look to those guys that can articulate the message clearly and follow their lead.
All right, Chris Chocola of